Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
And Eric V.
And we're joined by a very special guest, Melody. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you.
Absolutely. So where are you from, Melody?
So I am from Texas. I live just outside of Houston on the northwest side, a little town called Cypress.
Nice. And when were you first introduced to recovery?
So my first introduction to recovery was when I was 16. My first treatment was when I was 16. My first AA meeting was when I was 16. Didn't get sober till I was 42. So a lot of stuff in between 16 and 42. But yeah, my first introduction was at the ripe old age of 16.
Nice. And how long have you been sober?
My sobriety date's November 12th, 2015. So a little 4.5 years or so.
Nice. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
And with all that out of the way, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us. So take it away.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much for having me and for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
You know, I found alcohol when I was 12. I remember the first time I drank, and I didn't, I experienced that feeling, and I just fell in love from that day. I had never really been around it. My parents weren't big drinkers. We were Southern Baptists, so it wasn't really around in my house. But I had the opportunity to go to a party one night, and they had this Hawaiian punch mixed with something, and I absolutely loved the way that felt, and vividly remember, at 12, just how much I loved it. And it was from that point on, really and truly, my goal was to find out how I could do that more often than not. The obsession hit pretty darn quick. My whole junior high school years were, lots of rebelliousness, trying to do what I wanted to do, get away from my parents and drink like I wanted to. I grew up in Texas. I was born in Memphis. And then when I was 3, my dad moved my immediate family, myself, my sister, who was 2.5 years younger than me, to Texas. And so all of my extended family, cousins, and everybody were still in the Memphis area. But I grew up in the Dallas area. And, I remember, not really ever being happy as a kid, just always wishing I was somebody else, always wishing I was, somewhere else. But when I would drink, that would alleviate those feelings. And I felt okay. So at the age of 16, I got in some trouble with drinking, and my parents sent me to a 6-week inpatient treatment center. I just saw it as 6 weeks off of school, and where I could just go and smoke cigarettes and, not have to be in school. So I didn't really take it seriously.
What was the trouble you got in?
It wasn't like legal trouble or anything. I went to a small private school, and I had gone to a party, and there was a lot of drinking, and so my sister had told on me. So I was in trouble for that.
Oh, lame.
That was
totally lame.
In my world, it was like big trouble, because, we just didn't do that. But that was the trouble. So, but I was like, I'll go to treatment, because I just saw it as a pass from school. So, I didn't stick around, obviously. I went back and did what I did. Pretty much, barely graduated high school. I graduated, but my grades were definitely not something I was interested in. In that process, dabbled in some other things besides alcohol, but really my go-to was alcohol and was drinking. And I knew that there were alcoholics in my family. I had always been told that. I remember my dad showing me this old family photo of 9 old men standing there, black and white, nobody's smiling. And he said 7 of those 9 people died from alcohol-related deaths. So I knew that, he had a sister that was an alcoholic, and I knew it was there, but I didn't think that was me, because, I was different. I wasn't going to be that kind of person. So I get out of high school. I want to be as far away from my folks as I can, so that I can drink like I want to. And so I moved 700 miles away back to the Memphis area for college. And was in school. I had a GPA of 3.5, but within the first 6 months, I was arrested a couple times for my drinking. I wrecked 2 cars that were not mine from drinking. And then I found myself pregnant 6 months after I left home at 19. So when I drank like I wanted to with no supervision, that's what happened. But I was able to maintain the grades, and like my parents had no idea any of this was going on. I was able to like get myself out of jail and pay for the cars, and they had no clue. So when I got pregnant, I called them and said, well, we've got a situation. So, that woke me up for a minute. I kept the baby. I went back to Austin. The boyfriend followed me. We got married. I had the baby. That was a very short marriage. But my drinking, Mother Nature kind of caught on at that point, and my drinking had not progressed to the point where I was sober for the pregnancy, and then sober after I had the baby. And then went through a divorce, started to have some, I had a grandmother that would take Percocet and Darvocet for a headache. And so, if I ever had an ailment, she would just distribute them to me. And I started finding, I really liked that. And so had a little of that going on, trying to control my drinking a little bit. But at 22, I came back into the program because I wasn't happy. I was crying all the time. I was a single mom of a 2-year-old. And at that point, I met a woman named Sherry who was from Memphis. She had 5 years of sobriety, and I asked her to be my sponsor. And so we started going through the steps. I went back to college, and I stayed sober for a little bit. I didn't want to do all the steps. I wanted to go to meetings, and I also wanted to kind of wanted to do AA a la carte. I didn't want to do all the work necessary to have that entire psychic change. And I would find myself like trying to work it out to where I could be spiritual 5 days a week and then party on the weekends when I didn't have my son, So I wasn't all the way in, sitting all the way down, but I was also working an internship in a waiting table as a single mom, and I was in college full time. So I did that from 22 to 25. Ended up finishing school. I met a guy who lived in Texas, so I ended up marrying him. Me and my little 5-year-old at that point moved back to Texas. He was a very, very religious person. And I think in my mind, I thought, well, he'll keep me, quote unquote, good. Because to me, it was still a moral deficiency if I were drinking like I wanted to. I thought I had low morals. And so looking back, that's what I think really drew me into that. And so he was he was a very religious person, didn't drink. So we get married. I'm doing the married life, newlywed thing. AA is no longer on my radar. And pretty quickly, probably a year in, I get pregnant again. So I've got another baby on the way. That kept me relatively sober. But then I had her, and then I start finding myself wanting to hang out with these women in the neighborhood, playing bunco and these things that suburban women do, and re-experiencing that love I had for alcohol, I started working. I had another baby, so at this point I have 3. I started working. I was a stay-at-home mom, but I started doing this thing on the side, which was like a party plan company thing where we would have like little catalog parties where women would come and shop and we'd all drink wine the whole time. Well, I earned a trip. They were giving out a trip to Naples, Florida. And I thought, if I earn that trip, then I get 5 days to drink like I want to. So I started with this company, and I earned the trip in 6 weeks, which I don't think anybody had ever done. The girl that brought me into the company was like baffled by that, but I had a mission. And so when I went on that trip, it was the first time where I was like, if I remove myself from the house situation, then I can drink like I want to, right? So get back home, have guilt and remorse over that, go back to AA, do AA for a little while, and then talk myself back out of it. Like I've made too big of a deal of that. It's fine. I can control this, right? I did that for the next 20 years. I started my own company in 2009. It was a fitness company. I was empowering women and trainers all across the state of Texas to live their best life and be their healthiest. And I was in the closet literally drinking myself to death. In 2015, at the height, let me back it up a little bit. In 2005, my sister that I had mentioned, she also was an alcoholic. And her name was Cynthia. And in 2005, she had a suicide attempt and woke up, unbelievably, woke up. They didn't know how many pills she had taken. 6 months later, she did it again, and she was successful. And so I lost her in 2005, and it was horrible. It was really life-changing, and I had no way of processing or dealing. And so I drank at that for the next 10 years, really. It was one of those things where I almost had PTSD, the details around how it happened and just the loneliness and sadness that she must have experienced in those moments haunted me. And I could not speak of it. And so I didn't speak of it for 10 years. And my ex-husband and I moved often. We moved 12 times in 17 years of marriage. And so it was easy for me to leave that situation in the spot where we had been living. And then after that, nobody knew I even had a sister for 10 years. I mean, if people would ask me, I would say I was an only child because I didn't know how to do anything with that. I thought it was going to take years of counseling and therapy. And I'll circle back to how all that happened within the steps. But anyway, so really that was a catalyst for my drinking in some regards. So if you fast forward to 2015, I now have this company that I founded that's, doing well over $1.5 million a year. I've got 150 trainers across the state that are all successful business owners, and I'm leading the whole team of them. And I still didn't understand how I could fully accept step one because my life did not look unmanageable. I had everything you could imagine that you would want, that I thought I would want. I had the house and the cars and the vacations and the families and all of it. But I was every night crying myself to sleep, couldn't articulate why, had no idea what was wrong with me, but there was something so wrong with me. So I remember in 2014, I had another baby. So I have 4 kids. I'm not done. I'm not having any more kids. But in 2014, I had a baby, and I was changing his diaper, and he was about 6 months old. And I had this very clear image in my head and this thought that I am not going to see his 5th birthday if I don't stop drinking like I am. And that probably sobered me up for maybe a week or two, and then I drank for another year. In 2015, in November, I had created these incentive trips for my company, and they were bougie trips that these trainers could earn based on their sales. And I mean, I took them to Belize, San Diego, Mexico, all inclusive. Literally, I created that incentive just because I would have the opportunity once a year to go drink like I wanted to without anybody watching me. And I didn't care that I was the boss. I was at the swim up bar at, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning every morning. And the leadership factor of it did not make a bit of difference to me. That alcohol overruled everything.
Yeah.
So we had a cruise planned for the end of November in 2015, and I had a new therapist because I always thought a therapist could fix me. I thought self-help books could fix me. I thought the right conference could fix me and these motivational speakers, and so I tried all that. So I had this new therapist, and I thought, I'm going to be honest with her. This was the first time I'd ever been honest with a therapist about my drinking, and my plan was to go on this cruise and then get off and check myself into rehab because I knew that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And so I told her my plan, and her words to me were, "Please be careful." And that's all she said was, "Please be careful." The next day I told a friend of mine who was in the program, and she had been sober for a while and watched me trying to get sober for the previous 3 years. I told her my plan too, which took a lot to get it out of my mouth to her because I knew her, and she knew me. And her words to me were, "Please be careful." And I was like, okay, that's too random that both people said the exact same thing to me. And so I had enough touch point with God to think that might have been something bigger than me that happened. Yeah. And so I went home and I told my husband, I said, I have to have help. This isn't gonna be good. I need to go to treatment. And he did not know. My kids had never seen me drink. I hid it. I used to walk around with a Starbucks mug that was filled up with red wine and not coffee. Nobody knew the extent of my drinking. I was a closet drinker, like literally. I had a big closet and I did a lot of drinking in there. Some guys go out in the garage. I went in my big closet. And so there was like a little bit of confusion on his end, like why? And I was like, well, let me tell you why, because this has been going on. So I went to a place in Atlanta, and I walked in and, it was this place where it's for where they send the pilots and the doctors and the people who need to keep their licensing. Cause I thought that was the kind of alcoholic I was. Like, I didn't need to go to just like the regular one. Like, I was special. I had this ridiculous ego. And I look back now and laugh at that, but I walked in and they said, we're going to spend 30 days on step one. And I had all of my wisdom and my judgment thought, what the hell are you going to do for 30 days on step one? But what that treatment center taught me was the unmanageability has nothing to do with my external circumstances. That's an internal condition. And when I learned that, and I learned about the disease of alcoholism, and I learned that my body is different than that of a non-alcoholic, all of a sudden these puzzle pieces fit. All of a sudden I was like, holy shit, like this is why I can exert my willpower in any other area of my life and usually get it done, whatever it is I'm set out to do. But when it comes to drinking, I cannot. And I have tried every single way known to man that you could imagine. And I could not. I could stop drinking, but I couldn't stay stopped for any period of time with any semblance of sanity or contentment, And so when that happened, that was like the light bulb moment. The puzzle pieces came together and I was like, okay, I think this is what I have to learn. And so I did 30 days there. It was a 90-day program. I wanted to get closer back to Texas. And so I ended up transferring from that one after 30 days to another one for another 30 days in Texas. But I was a sponge the entire time, and I learned the importance of community. I learned the importance of having a spiritual path. In the process, my counselor at both treatment centers told me that in order for me to stay sober, I was going to have my own spiritual path. And I said, you don't understand. I don't have the freedom to say that in my house. My husband this is who he is. This religion is his identity. And it's not going to play well. This is like me. This is like an earth shattering proposal for me to say that I don't agree. Like, I had been silent about my disagreement for 17 years. I had just chosen not to fight. I had just chosen to go along to get along and then drank at it. And so I had never vocalized my disagreement with it. And so, my counselor at the second treatment center said, Melody, you're going to have to do that if you're going to stay sober. And I said, okay. And so he came in for family week. And I said, look, I've got to find my own spiritual path. And I knew it. When I looked at him, it was like his world shattered. It did. It crumbled. And so I get out of treatment. I go to sober living for about 3 weeks. And then I come back home and I have a second conversation with him. We didn't address it after that conversation in the counselor's office. We get home and I said, I really feel like I have to find my own spiritual path. And here are the things I disagree with in this church. And, I'm not talking about going off and doing something crazy. We're still the same God. I'm just talking about being free to worship the way that I want to at a different building, and I could see a day when my girls decide if they want to go with mom or they want to go with dad. So about, I guess the following week, it was about 7 days later, it was a Wednesday afternoon, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for 17 years, as also running the company, but that was my primary role in the house. And at this time, my little guy was 1.5, and my girls were 12 and 14, and then my oldest was out of the house and in his 20s. So it was a Wednesday, and usually they got home from school at about 3:30, and at 3:15, I got a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and this woman said, are you Melody Chandler? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you've been served. And I got served with divorce papers. Initially, when I first took them from her, I thought, okay, that was a gift. Because I had been praying to know if I should file or what I should do. And I didn't have a peace around it. And so I felt like it was a gift when I was served. And then I opened it up and I read the 6-page affidavit that was all misinformation. There were nuggets of truth in it, but couched in a whole bunch of BS that made me seem like I was a danger, even though I was at this point sober I had not relapsed since treatment. I've been sober since November. We're in February now. But there was a 10-day restraining order against my children, against me with my children, before I could get in front of a judge to tell them the truth of what was happening, what was going on, and that I was completely, like, my kids were not ever in danger with me. And that was horrific, you know? I mean, those 10 days, my attorney was like, there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait until you get your hearing. And it was horrible. And so I got the hearing, and he didn't get anything he wanted as far as, you know, supervised visits or anything like that. But I was required to, like, get an apartment, and we were going through the process of the divorce. So fast forward just a little bit, we go to mediation, and his MO when things are uncomfortable is to move. And like I mentioned, we've moved 12 times in 17 years. And so I sat down in mediation, and it occurred to me, he's going to want to move the kids. And because we had only lived in that area for a year. We had just moved there about a year prior from another town in Texas, and that he loves. And I told my attorney, I said, if you go out there and he says he wants to move, we're done for the day, because that's not an option. He's not moving. And she came back and she said he wants to move. And I said, we're done. There's nothing more to talk about. I'm not allowing that. I had established an AA group in Frisco, which is where I got sober. I had established a community with the women in there. I had a meeting that I was going to every morning at 7:00. You know, I was not interested in moving. And so for the next, that was in February. So until August, I fought that. And I had a very expensive attorney. And you know, and he was willing to pull the kids in for social study and all of these things, and they were just very confused and lost. And my attorney advised me in August. She said, look, he's offering you the baby, who was 2 at this point. He's offering you 2 weeks each month with the little one, and the girls every other weekend. And if you go in front of a judge, you've only been sober like 6 months. So the judge may say you're going to get less time. And so it's a roll of the dice, Melody. I think you should take this deal. And so I took my attorney's advice and I signed it, and he moved. So my children were now living 3.5 hours away from me. I was by myself in an apartment up in Dallas. And it was truly, you know, I look at it now in a very different way than I did then. Of course, then, you know, I had so much anger towards him, but I also believed what the book said. And that idea that resentment is the dubious luxury of normal men used to piss me off, because I was like, well, how can I not be resentful? He just took everything from me, and I was doing the right thing by getting sober, you know? I felt so victimized. And I remember people in the meetings would be like, Melody, why help other women with this? And I just would think, I just want to roll my eyes right now, because that doesn't help me right now. This hurts, you know? I look at it now as, you know, I had opportunity to heal, and I had opportunity to develop a relationship with God, because I wasn't being asked to be a mother in those weeks. I did not have my little one. But back then it definitely did not feel like that. So I just immersed myself in the program. I was, you know, 2 meetings a day for months in the beginning when they were gone, and I was in my first year of sobriety. You know, working with my sponsor constantly, going through the steps. I had an experience in my 9th step around my sister. You know, I always thought, you know, I had first told the story of her when I was in treatment, and that was the first time I ever told the story. And when I was doing my 9th step, you know, I had a spiritual experience around that. I had written her a letter, and I read the letter, and to give you a little bit more background, she was like a little hippie girl, long blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful, drove like a VW van in high school, just loved Bob Marley, like total hippie, like hung out at Zilker Park in Austin all the time. And she loved butterflies, and she always like would have, you know, she was like she skipped everywhere as a kid until she like, you know, had to walk. I mean, she just had this spirit that was beautiful. And so my dad had done this memorial for her at Zilker Park, and had one of those stones that said, you know, her name, and then something to the effect of, you're a butterfly now, and you get to fly and spread your wings. You know, she had rheumatoid arthritis, but she was in chronic pain, and so she was in no more pain. But I remember when we were there for her like dedication of that stone at Zilker Botanical Gardens, and I saw a butterfly that day when I was there, and I thought, you know, every time I see a butterfly, I'm going to think of her. And I swear I didn't see a butterfly for 10 years. I never had a moment in that 10 years that I could not speak of it that I saw one and it meant anything to me. So I'm in my back patio doing my 9th step. This was my first year of sobriety. And I had written her a letter. And in my letter, I had just made amends for not being a better example as a big sister. I would party with her and just that kind of thing. And that I wasn't able to help her and that I had not been sober when she had tried to get sober and those things. And I just read this letter out loud and I closed my eyes and I was crying and praying and I opened my eyes, I look over and there literally are 2 white butterflies dancing in the courtyard in my backyard. And it wasn't like a flyby. It was like they were freaking dancing together. Not just one, but 2. And it was like this, it was almost like I heard this, like, I'm free. It's okay. You did the best you could with what you had. And now just be at peace and I'm okay. And since that moment, I've never been horrified by it because I know she's at peace. I know I'll see her again too. And that's beautiful. But now at the most, I'm not kidding you. Like there have been so many moments in my sobriety that have been devastatingly painful emotionally. And it will never fail that there will be a butterfly that will appear at some point. I mean, it has happened to me countless times. And it's just like, a little God wink that he's here, and that he's given me that freedom. So for 3.5 years, I didn't have the kids with me. My younger daughter did want to come live with me about 1.5 years after the divorce. So she came and lived with me full time. So then I find myself in May of last year. The little guy's supposed to start school in August. And according to the decree, once he starts kindergarten, I only get him every other weekend because he's living in Houston at this point. My ex-husband had gotten remarried and moved to Houston. So, I had some issues with my company, so I had to find another job. I had just gotten hired with this fantastic job in Dallas, amazing opportunity, and this was in May. And I was reaching out to attorneys. Let me back up one thing. You remember that lawyer that took me through the whole process of advising me to sign the paperwork? Well, she walked in the rooms of AA about 1 year after my divorce was final.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She's still sober, which is great. But yeah, she was, she did. She walked in the rooms. So I was consulting with attorneys to see how I was going to get custody back and have him come back to Dallas because he was about to start kindergarten 4 months later. And I did not want every other weekend. And every attorney I talked to said, why in the hell did you ever sign that decree? No judge in Texas would have ever let you move, ever. Like, there is no way you're getting him back. You could spend $50,000 and still not have a shot in hell because there's been no change. There's nothing you can say. There's a reason. There's no reason. Like, he's been there for 3.5 years. He's there. So I had just gotten hired at this job, and the job was for Dallas, and I was about to go to training the next day in Tampa, Florida. My daughter says to me, Mom, why can't we all just live in Houston? So that way you get Kyle every other week and Dad's there and all that. And I said, Megan, I just got this job here in Dallas. It's a great job. We can't just find these all the time, and there's nothing I can do. So I go to Tampa the next day, and my boss says, so they had to hire another sales guy too. He says, Steve, you've got Oklahoma and Dallas. Melody, I'm giving you Dallas and Houston. Those are your markets. And I said, really? I said, do you care where I live? It was a sales job. He goes, no. So 3 weeks later, my lease on my condo was up. Just happened to be up 3 weeks later. And I found a house that was 1.8 miles from my ex-husband and his new wife. And so sight unseen, I signed a lease on this new place, and I moved here 3 weeks later. And I moved here with the idea that I was going to have my little guy every other week, and my other daughter was just going to stay with me and visit her dad. So we get here, unpack on July 4th. I had met my ex-husband's new wife of 6 months, like one time at my oldest daughter's graduation. And on July 6th, I get a text from his wife, and it says, we need to talk. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. We don't talk, but okay, let's meet for coffee. And she proceeded to tell me that my ex-husband has a massive drinking problem, and he's been drinking and driving around with my little 5-year-old in the car, multiple occasions. So I take him I hire another lawyer. I go back to court. I say, look, we went to mediation. I said, here's the deal. I'm not going to try to get primary custody right now. I will give you the opportunity to have 50-50. If you go to AA, you blow in SoberLink, you do this for 6 months, and then we can go back to 50-50. Right now it's got to be supervised and all of that, but I will give you the chance. I'm not just going to go straight for full custody, which I could have. I'm going to give you an opportunity because I wanted him to get well. For the first time, I had compassion for him because he's sick, and it allowed me to see him as somebody, as a newcomer.
Yeah.
And we agreed to that. And 6 months later, he failed a blow. I'm sorry, 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, he failed a blow. And so I went back to mediation and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot risk his life. And he was in the car when he failed a blow. So I now have primary custody of my little guy. And, my older daughter lives here. He has visits, but he's still blowing in SoberLink. And my family has been restored, and the, this whole COVID thing, my oldest daughter has been home from college since March and at my house. So since March, I've had my children under my roof and we've had family dinners every night. And it's almost like God has restored that time that I lost with them, and the relationships that I have now with them are of, and that was another thing. When I was separated from them, the relationships, even though we weren't under the same roof, became so much more real and valuable and authentic. And because I was becoming whole, and all of that, all of those blessings, all of the things that I've received are gifts from this program and this way of living. I am eternally grateful for this, the women who spent the time with me in the beginning, and now the opportunity that I have to give back is just a gift. And I'm incredibly grateful for it.
All right. Awesome. We definitely have some questions for you. Eric, would you like to go first?
You always ask, how do you feel, David?
I'm giving you the decision, buddy.
Sure. I'll go first.
All right.
So, I guess I want to talk about your relapse a little bit, which I'm not sure. You were in the program, correct, when you relapsed after that first year?
Which relapse?
The year. Which relapse?
So when So when I was 22, I think I made a year. I'm not sure if it was a solid year or if it was close to a year, but that was the first attempt at really trying to do what my sponsor recommended.
Yeah.
She still has in her book, there's a spot in the book that talks about the potential alcoholic. She wrote my name out to the side. I was 22. She was 40. She's like, Melody, I was trying to save you from the next 20 years of hell. I didn't fully grasp the idea truly that I was an alcoholic at that point. I thought maybe there was a little bit of a problem, but that underlying notion that I could drink again was there. That was never gone at that point.
So I guess, did you work the steps during that time?
I did not make it all the way through the steps. No. I think I don't even really remember doing a thorough fourth step. I know I didn't do amends. Mm-hmm. So I there was not a solid 1 through 12. No.
So I guess, okay. So the question kind of is like, you were exposed, right? Like that, and that was the time before where you got the most time, correct?
Yes.
How much of that, because I've relapsed a few times. So I guess like how much of doing the program at that point influence your decision making when you went back out? And not as much in the sense, because you kind of like spoke a little bit about it, where you're talking about, I set up this achievement event for, people at my work to give me the excuse to drink. So like you're figuring out ways to drink acceptably and to hide it. Like how did you think did the program affect the way that you went about drinking?
No, because in my mind at that point, I wasn't as bad as the people that really needed to do all of the programs. I mean, looking back in those 20 years, I had never really fully accepted that I was an alcoholic, to that extent. In my mind, there were degrees of alcoholism. And those people who really needed to work all the steps and do all the steps that the AA program suggested, those people were worse than I was. I wanted to just kind of pick and choose. So there was not anything that really resonated with me when I went back out. It was just like, well, I just made too big of a deal about it. I'm not that bad. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I'm going to ask two questions. So that's secretly why I let Eric go first, because I wanted to ask two questions. Foolies on you, Eric. No. Okay, so the first question is, you can only pick one. What is your favorite step?
3, for sure.
Yes. Great answer. Fantastic. I agree. The third step is
where the magic
favorite.
happens. Page 62 and 63. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Eric says step 10, which is not a wrong answer. It's a fantastic answer. But
and they coexist, right? I mean, I can't be in a meeting that talks about step 10 without talking about step 3. I was in one this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. All right, now to the juicy question. All right, and you talked about struggling with sort of the idea or like coming to that point of unmanageability with that first or that I think your last trip into rehab in Atlanta, I think you said, and you're going to do 30 days on the first step. So why do you think inward unmanageability is more difficult to recognize than outward unmanageability?
I did not have a vocabulary to put around what was happening inside of me. And I think when I would look, that's one thing, when I would look at the idea of unmanageability, and my definition of unmanageability or my definition of a manageable life means I got my shit under control. My bills are being paid. I'm getting to do what I want to do. I'm kind of, that makes it manageable, right? I did not know how to, one thing that sobriety did for me, and it's such a gift, is it gave me a vocabulary to describe things going on inside. When you start drinking at 12, they say you kind of cut off that growth emotionally and those things that probably naturally happen for most people who aren't numbing themselves and anesthetizing themselves as often as I was. So I didn't even know how to express that internal upheaval and just irritability and restlessness and discontent. I just knew that there was this feeling inside that I wanted to get away from. And that was pretty constant, that I just wanted to escape from. I didn't know how to articulate things like, what's driving this? Oh, well, that's fear. To identify things. And I read a book in treatment called Trauma and Addiction. And that was the first time I was like, holy crap, I am reading things that are like my life, and it was so eye-opening, and it was such a relief, because I was like, okay, this is real stuff. This happens. And so there's got to be a solution for it. And I just kind of became a sponge for how, what do I have to do, and I had a sponsor, that woman I told you about that took me through the steps and who wrote my name in her book. She's still my sponsor. She's been sober 25 years, and I call her, and I called her throughout that 20 years. Every time shit would hit the fan, I'd call her, and she'd answer the phone and be like, is that enough? And, she said to me, Melody, I thought when Cynthia died, that was going to be it. You were going to see, gosh, I got to quit. And, I said, Sherry, that did not even enter my realm of consciousness for me to quit because of what I just saw. Didn't even enter my realm of consciousness. That's insanity, That is the nature of this disease. that wouldn't even cross my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Great answer. What do you got, Eric?
I think Carly's on. Right?
I don't believe she is. No.
Oh, I heard a beep.
Carly is not. Carly did not join us
Okay, I heard a beep.
this evening.
So I think you just kind of brought up sponsorship, and I'm assuming you sponsor people.
I do. That's the biggest blessing that I've gained. I took a meeting today out to the Orchard, which is I actually closed my business last November, and it was still profitable. It was still doing just fine. But I had a passion for helping those in, need help. And so I turned it into, I now work for a treatment center, and I was able to bring a meeting today to our residents that are there. But that's one of the biggest blessings, is being able to give back, and I feel a responsibility to do that, but it's also it's an honor and a gift to be able to do that, and sharing with people. One of the things that I recognized that happened when those people were telling me, Melody, one day you're going to be able to use this experience to help others when my kids were removed from me. I used to take meetings when I lived in Dallas and they weren't there. I would take them to the women's correctional facility. So I would go to the maximum security unit in McKinney, which is just a little town north of Dallas. And, those women in there are separated from their children. And I would explain it, like I would tell my story and I would share my story. And immediately I had a bond with them. And I had they trusted me at a different level because they knew I was experiencing what they were experiencing at that moment, and that, at that point, I didn't know that I was going to get them back. I mean, I had no idea, but that in and of itself, I was able to do that on a weekly basis for a long time when I lived up there. It was just a gift to be able to do that.
So,
all right.
Kind of talking about sponsorship, right? And that relationship between a sponsee and a sponsor that you've had with your own sponsor, but kind of the relationship you have with your sponsees. Can you kind of describe that bond that you share with them?
Yeah. I think it's sacred, I mean, they're trusting me and they're looking to me to help them find, a solution for this disease. And all I am in that role is a vessel to be used of God. In the beginning, I was super leery of being a sponsor. Like after my first year of sobriety, I just felt like, what if I don't say the perfect thing? And what if I screw up and they, I teach them something wrong or whatever. And then I, got schooled pretty quick by my own sponsor. And she was like, Melody, I am not getting them sober at all. All I am is a vessel and a conduit of what God's going to do. And so, nothing excites me more than somebody who's willing and desperate, because I've had a lot of girls who weren't willing and desperate, and they usually 1, 2, 3, and then they're out, and that happens all the time. But those who have actually stuck it out, watching that light come on. And my thing was, I watched women change their bodies for 10 years in the fitness industry, and I that was intrinsically rewarding to me. But watching somebody have a soul change is like exponentially more rewarding, and that is what I get in this program and have the opportunity of getting to do. So I treasure working with sponsees. I mean, it's honestly, it's one of the biggest gifts of this program.
Yeah.
You like that one, David?
All right.
The soul change. I heard you make a noise on that one.
That's a fantastic quote. And it could certainly be the title of this episode for sure. All right. So you have a 5-year-old and then like a 20-something-year-old. Am I right? Okay.
So I've got 26, 19. Oh wait, yeah, 19. She'll be 20 this year. 17, and then 6. So one that's starting kindergarten. I'm sorry, first grade, and then one that'll be a senior in high school. One that's going to be a sophomore in college, and then my oldest is out of the house and out of college and a professional now. So
All
It's
right.
pretty cool. My phone rings all the time. I get lots of activity. It's so fun.
That's a good thing. That's great.
I love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I would have it no other way.
Mm-hmm. All right. So my question is, how has your approach changed throughout the years on how you addressed and educated your children about drugs and alcohol? Because obviously through your first 3 kids, you were predominantly using on and off. And now for your youngest, they pretty much will have a mom completely sober, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how is that, that process of educating your children about that? How has it changed?
That's a great question. Yeah, there was a lot of silence in my house until I got sober around all of this, obviously, because I had something I needed to hide. But I believe in full transparency, and my kids know just how involved I am with my sponsees, with meetings, especially now that we're doing them in Zoom. I do Zoom meetings every single day, and, my girls are constantly in and out of my room. And so we have very open conversations about it, and they know that, this deal is hereditary, and there's a good chance that one of them may have that little gene for it, and, they know the story, and they've seen the fallout in my life, and also in just overhearing things. And I mean, it's just one of an open communication. It's transparency. There's nothing to hide. I mean, I don't have any like my anonymity. To me, I want to be of use however God wants to put me to use, right? So I am not walking around like trying to keep things under wraps with the fact that I'm sober. I have no shame around my sobriety. In my mind, that'd be like having shame if I was a diabetic. It's a friggin' disease. I have it, I dealt with it, I treat it, I'm recovered, and so for me, it's not like taboo, and so we've taken that veil off of the whole, that sort of taboo sense of it, and we're just open and transparent about it.
All right. And quick follow-up, how worried are you that your kids might display this?
I'm not worried, because I serve a big God, and if they do and they end up, going down that path, then I have a solution that will absolutely work for everybody if they want it. So obviously I don't want to see my kids experience pain, and I certainly wouldn't wish the road that leads them to God includes what I had to go through to get there. I definitely don't. However, it definitely doesn't keep me up at night. My kids are God's kids, and at the end of the day, He's in control. So I don't walk around in fear of that.
All right. Fantastic. What else you got, Eric?
This will be, I guess, a harder question. So you talked a lot about your divorce, and
I'm sorry, say it again. I missed that word.
You talked a lot about your divorce, and there's a lot of. It sounds like there was a lot of distrust and a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of emotions that came from that naturally. For anyone, there would be a lot, but there's certain things that it just didn't sound like it was smooth, right? So I suppose the question is, like, how do you move forward with future romantic relationships and rebuilding trust with a partner when the one you were with betrayed you, or you felt like you were betrayed?
So one of the things, that's a good question. So one of the things that, my sponsor has always encouraged me to do is take a look at that 4th column, right, in my 4th step. And that's where I disregard whatever it is that I feel victimized from and just really look at what I did. So if I look at my behavior over 17 years, I was also dishonest because I was hiding drinking, and I was dishonest because I wasn't truthful with my feelings and how I thought about things. And so I didn't set it up for success either. And what I will say is that we have a very amicable relationship now. As a matter of fact, I'm dating somebody that's in the program who happens to live in Dallas. And the last 2 times I've gone up to visit him, I invited my ex-husband to actually stay in my home with my kids because it would be easier it's a good sized house and all the kids are comfortable in their rooms. And so he did. So like, it's all good now, you know? I mean, God can restore like the craziest stuff. If you'd have told me that 6 months ago, I'd have been like, no, he's not staying in my house when I'm not there. But it works, you know? And it's just a result of this program. I don't hold ill will. I know that I had a role in all of it, you know, and so did he. And I did the best I could with what I had at the time, and so did he. And so I don't walk around angry at all. I feel like, you know, I feel like I don't have like trust issues in relationship because I go in as I'm a trusting person, and I don't harbor feelings like that of distrust. And I'm blessed with an amazing guy that's also sober, and it's pretty cool.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. I just have one last question. This will be a fun one since the last 2 were the meat and the potatoes of the episode. And I'm sure Eric knows what my fun question is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I'm not sure your fun question will be. Please don't. Go ahead. Let me see if it's.
I'm scared.
He's like, please don't. He knows exactly what it's going to be. Okay, so Eric and I are lifelong Northerners, and you are a lifelong Southerner. So what do you find funny or peculiar about people from the North?
So my boyfriend is from Boston.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I love his accent. It's so cute. It is. And he loves mine. He thinks I sound like a hick. I don't think I do, but
I don't think you do.
Yeah, he hears the country twang every now and then.
A little bit. Yeah, I caught it a couple times, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, probably just like what I was saying earlier, like my disdain for when things get below 40. I'm probably just a big wuss to you guys. I can't handle that. The thought that you guys handle like in the teens in the winter is a nightmare. I mean, I can't imagine. But yeah, I mean, I am such a Southern person. I mean, he's the first guy I've dated from, you know, anywhere outside of Texas. So, and it's relatively new. So I don't know that there are quirks yet that I could identify. I don't know.
All right. I didn't know if you'd like visited the North. And
do y'all say y'all?
We do.
Yeah, I say y'all.
I mean, but that's, so I think that stops like pretty much at Maryland.
Yeah,
oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah. Anywhere above us doesn't really say it all that much.
Well, he's like you guys. He says you guys. He doesn't say y'all. And so it's like you guys.
From Boston wouldn't. Yeah.
It's just a little bit like it's weird because you'll see the dialect change within Maryland. So like from Southern Maryland up to like, I mean, we'll throw Cecil County out of here for right now, but you'll see how it changes, like from like Southern to Northern. It's really trippy. Maryland has like some crazy accents going on. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The northeast, south, and west of our state are 4 very different, distinct geographical areas, and they all have their different mannerisms, and it's pretty entertaining to be in such a small but very different state.
Yeah, that is. That's interesting.
Yeah, and Texas. I mean, you guys just seem, I don't know, just super gung-ho Texas.
There's a lot of Texas pride for sure. I mean, there definitely is. And I lived in Tucson, Arizona for a couple of years in one of our 12 moves, which I loved because it was like, dude, we got mountains we can hike. They're in our backyard. We can go, you know, we're not far from Vegas. Like it's just outdoorsy. I absolutely loved it. But then we moved back to Texas. So, I mean, I love Texas. I do. It's just kind of what I've known. But yeah, we have definitely some some people who think we're our own little country down here.
You kind of are. I mean,
Yeah.
you could be.
Yeah, we could be. Friggin' big.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'll say it from the north to the south. You can't mess with Texas.
Yeah, you don't want to come here right now either. I think we're kind of a hot spot for COVID. So.
I know. Yeah. Let's not go down that road.
Let's don't.
Not today.
Let's don't.
All right, Eric. Is it about that time?
Well, David, we are actually. I'm in a transitional phase right now, so all of my stuff is thrown everywhere. So we're not going to do a Twitter question today. Instead,
no Twitter question today?
Yes, no Twitter question. Instead, we're just going to do a topic.
Should we leave it at that?
Huh?
Yeah. So what Melody, what we normally do is one of our listeners from either Instagram or Facebook or Twitter will send us a question, and then we'll do a quick round robin based off that question. So you would answer, then I would, and then Eric would. Since Eric does not have that information available, which I understand because he's in the middle of a move.
So, Melody,
Eric, should we let her choose a topic?
Well, yes, Melody. Is there something that's been on your mind about recovery that is a topic, or if you have a question you would want, us all to answer? Do you have anything on the top of your mind?
Yeah. So how about, what do you guys think about the idea that Zoom meetings continue beyond this necessity for them to coincide with in-room meetings?
All right. Eric, do you want to answer first, or would you like me to?
I'll answer first.
Yes, I figured.
So are you talking about the concept of them existing in the same place? As far as like having meetings be streamed, or like when you look at a meeting schedule, there's Zoom meetings and there's in-person meetings.
There's Zoom meetings and in-person meetings.
Okay, so no hybrids. Okay.
No.
I've talked about this a lot actually, and I'm not sure if any of those podcasts have actually been released yet, but I think it's essential. I really hope that it continues because, you live in Houston, right? Or you live in Houston right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We live in Baltimore, right? Finding a meeting, super easy. It's not hard to go to a meeting. Within the local area that I live in, I can walk to multiple meetings. And I live in the suburbs. So it's not like I'm in a city. I'm in the suburbs. So there are people that, especially in these smaller, more rural areas, where there's not many people. What if, and I've talked to a few people on Twitter about this, who've DM'd us, and it's what if you don't like any of the people? And I know people are going to be like, well, maybe you should just, suck it up and, go to a meeting because you need it. And it's it can be kind of hard, right? I get that you have to change everything to change yourself, but we all were here for the first year. The first year of recovery, it can get a little gossipy. And let's be honest, recovery is gossip. It can be very gossipy. It can be, a lot of drama. It can, if you get caught up in that, social scene clique sort of thing, you can ostracize yourself, and it makes it a little bit harder. But honestly, I think for people who work a lot, for people who have kids, for rural, I know, with people who have kids, a lot of the times, they'll bring their kids to the meeting, and it's I have nothing to, I can't get a sitter. And it's well, now you can, you don't have to worry about the sitter. You can stay at home and, get your meeting, and you can still go to meetings. but it gives you another option. And I mean, I truly hope, the fellowships embrace this. And I've been fairly open about this. Like, I am not a member of a fellowship at this current moment. I have been a member of a fellowship, and at this current moment in time, I will not claim membership. But I feel like there's a real need for it, and it would really help people. Like, I'm like, I just, like, some of the people who reach out to us, like, and it's just like, man, if when I'm like, yeah, we have, 5 meetings a day in this town that I'm in. And it's like, we have like 7 meetings a week. And it's just like, man, this is where Zoom or, Google Hangouts or whatever the platform is, Discord. I just hope it continues, because then those people can connect with us. They can connect with anyone. But that's how I feel. I think it's great. Like, I just think I just hope there's a group of people who keep doing it once the world starts opening up.
All right. How do I feel about it? Very similar to Eric. I'm going to try and hit a couple different points, though. I really think he hit the nail on the head. I think the digital format of recovery is a really like blossoming avenue for recovering addicts of all kinds, and it's a really cool thing. And now they have this really awesome thing called podcast recovery. It goes out everywhere.
Ew.
And no, that was fun. That was my shameless plug, Eric.
Sweet.
I have to get in one. I had to get in one shameless plug. There it was. No, but I think Zoom meetings and really utilizing the technology to the best of our ability is a really awesome thing. And you're a little bit more wiser than us, Melody. You're of a slightly different generation, and Eric and I are a little bit more privy to, I don't know, technology, I guess, or more used to it. So I can see a lot of
There's not that big. There's
be-
not that big of an age difference between us.
Dude, how old are y'all?
We're 32. We're both 32. 31,
I'm not
32.
am I a different generation? Like,
Well, you're 10 years.
Well, technically you're Gen X, but we won't get into that.
Yeah.
If we want to get into generations,
Yeah,
yes, technically we're different generations, but not that. Like, it's not in the way that David just described it. You're not a dinosaur at the meeting.
Whoa! I did not say she. I said she was wiser and of a different generation. That's it. I didn't call her old.
That's a nice way of saying, like, when you see someone, you're like, oh man, you look really healthy. Like.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's all good. I'm not offended. It's all good.
I was being nice, but anyway, I can see a lot of the a lot of old timers, people's in their 50s and 60s and upwards, having a problem with it and really not grasping the need for it. But with a younger generation that's and even kids younger than us, I mean, just like you said, your addiction started, or your alcoholism started when you were 12. My addiction started around 11 and 12. And there's 11 and 12-year-olds out there right now who are going through the very same thing. And they're very apt to pick up those screens, and it's a comforting thing for them. So why not have that as an avenue for them? And also, like Eric talked about it, like in a way, I'm going to talk about it a little bit differently. He's like, you might not like those people, but there's also people out there who have really drastic social anxiety. And I know going into a meeting room full of 20, 30, 40, 50 people, strangers that you don't know, when you're already in such an emotional, psychological, fragile state, can be quite overwhelming for somebody like that who is fresh off drugs. Like that's a lot to ask of somebody. And if they have the option to be like, hey, just go into this Zoom meeting and listen in. Maybe you don't need to see anybody yet, but just listen to the message. See if anything starts to ring true. They can. I think it's a great way for people like that to really test the waters and start to feel a comfort in recovery, and then maybe be able to take that next step to actually going into a meeting. So I think it's an amazing thing. And Eric talked about the geographical advantages of it. Like, this is awesome. Like, we're talking across time zones, thousands of miles apart, and you're in Texas, we're in Baltimore, and that's because of digital technology. And I believe the fellowships are, I don't see how it can possibly hurt the fellowships in any way, shape, or form. And I think it'll really just broaden the scope and the net of recovery and bring a lot more connectivity between all people. And because I truly love talking with people from all across the country and all across the world through this podcast. And it's really helped me get a lot of different cultural perspectives and to see how, even though the disease is very much the same, the way we go about it is different in different places, and the way we go about recovery is different in different places. So the more perspective we can get from all these different point of views, I think will just make recovery a lot stronger.
Totally. Yeah.
What about you? How do you feel about it, Melody?
Totally agree. I mean, I think the wider the net, the more people we can affect. And if Zoom, takes one more person in and gives them relief from this disease, then why not? And I've seen, older people, older than me, who don't like Zoom. And I'm like, I don't understand that. Like, I freaking love it. What it has allowed me to do from Houston is reconnect with all my people that I got sober with back in Frisco. I do a Frisco meeting every single morning at 7:00 with all my people, I mean, I see that the only drawbacks I see would be the limited opportunity for service work if somebody got comfortable. And, there's a tendency sometimes in early sobriety to isolate. So I could see how you could get comfortable just isolating and not really making those connections, because part of it for me was building the connections around the service work and doing the stuff I didn't want to do at meetings, making coffee and greeting and that kind of thing. And so that would... But if somebody is finding a sponsor, hopefully the sponsor would say, okay, Zoom is awesome, but if we've got in-person meetings, we need to also do those as well. But I think overall, I absolutely hope that they continue. I mean, and I think our group plans to continue them once we're able to get back in person, which is great because they're all 4 hours away from me now. So I hope selfishly that they continue. But I think that, like you said, in today's world, I think so many different places have shifted into this as a necessity, but realize that the absolute power that there is in bringing it to people who are too scared to walk into the rooms. And I've personally been on meetings with several people that's their experience, and it's safe to get into a Zoom meeting,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And I think the technology will continue to get better. And I think, just the whole format will, because we're still testing it. Like, people are still feeling it out. I mean, we're only less than 6 months into this type of recovery, and I think it's going to be really cool to see how it gets integrated and accepted, and to see where it can go from here. So I think the sky is the limit, really.
It's exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time, but we would definitely like to thank our guest Melody for joining us today.
Woo! Thank you so much. It was great to be here. I appreciate it.
And
absolutely,
Melody, where can our listeners find you?
So, you mean like on social media or where I work or how?
Anything. Like, if there's anything you want to promote, anything like that.
Yeah, so I work for a new inpatient treatment facility called the Orchard on the Brazos. It's amazing. It's right outside of Houston on 132 acres. Beautiful property, so serene. Every time I go out there, I just feel the presence of God. I mean, it's really absolutely beautiful, full of butterflies and amazing clinical staff. We just opened our doors last week, so we've got 4 residents in there now, but we've got 16 beds, all private rooms. It's really an amazing place. So, my email is melody@theorchardrecovery.com. If anybody wants to send me an email, and I'm always available to help. If anybody, needs help, I will always respond and do what I can for anybody in their journey to sobriety. And if you're a guy, I'll forward you over to my guy friends in AA.
Perfect.
So, yeah. But I really appreciate you guys having me on. I love the work you're doing and helping to spread the word of recovery.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. It was an amazing episode, as always. Make sure you check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, our YouTube channel. If you like what you hear, please don't hesitate to donate to our Venmo, PayPal stuff. I don't know what else I'm missing. It's been a while since I did one of these. But most importantly, everybody out there, stay safe, stay clean.